Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the latest edition of the Woke Bros. Of course, I'm Big Wos, aka Wosley Lambre, joined as always by my partner, fresh out of Beverly Hills, now on the west side, my man Nando Vila. What's going on, bro?
Dude, this is LA, dude. You got to be taking meetings all the time,
That's
Like, it's all
it.
about, you got to do meetings, development meetings, general meetings, shit like that.
We love it. We love it. On today's show, obviously, was a very huge election night last night. We're taping this on a Wednesday afternoon. The Dems, I mean, there's no way to put it. They got crushed. They got destroyed. They got cucked. But, we do want to talk about what happened in Buffalo because I think it's instructive of just generally where the party is overall and how and when they circle the wagons and who their real allies are out in Buffalo in that race. But first, we do want to talk about the Virginia gubernatorial race, Nando, because this was embarrassing. Was embarrassing. Virginia has traditionally been a purple state. It's still pretty purple, but the Dems statewide, nationally, have kind of been dominating over there in the governorship. Both of the senators are Democrats. They've kind of been dominating in Virginia, except for last night. And, there's a myriad of reasons why one might point to as to why the Dems got destroyed in Virginia. And I don't want to sound like I'm happy. It sucks for the people of Virginia that they have to live under Republican rule over there, right? Like, selfishly, as somebody who lives in California, I don't really care. Like, he's not setting any agenda for me where I live, for me and mine, or even my family in New York. But, it sucks that they have to live under Republican rule. But I think the lesson to be learned out here is that they just never learn the right lessons. Ryan Grimm sort of wrote something. He wrote in The Intercept about the strategy that they took in concert with bumbling idiots like the Lincoln Project, where the strategy was essentially Donald Trump. These people cannot quit Donald Trump. They can't quit the dude. And so the strategy was to try to tie Donald Trump in some broad concept of racism to the Republican candidate. Meanwhile, he's a corporatist scumbag, that you could easily just kill him on the merits. Instead, what they did was, do this anti-Trump resistance, never Trump bullshit, which culminated in them doing a false flag tiki torch operation at one of this dude's campaign rallies. What's the Republican guy's name, Nando? I'm sorry, I can't even pretend to know this fucking empty name.
Glenn Youngkin. Former CEO of the Carlyle Group. Fucking is like vulture fucking financial predator. Again, it's just so weird. We've talked about the 2012 Obama campaign before on this show because I think it was one of the most well-run campaigns in recent Democratic Party memory, in that it was like a ruthlessly class war campaign. Like, Obama did not talk about any cultural issues. He just Mitt Romney's a fucking private equity financial.
He hates you and the people like you who have regular jobs. He's a country club scumbag.
Yeah. And he was right about it. I mean, it had the benefit of being true, which helps. And he won. He won that race pretty handily. Glenn Youngkin is basically Mitt Romney 2.0. Right. He was the CEO of the Carlyle Group. Mitt Romney was the CEO of Bain Capital. Same shit, right. And instead, they went all in on race, that this guy was like a racist. They did this literal false flag event. And the thing is, it rebound. The false flag event,
it's the most incredibly stupid thing. Who thinks this is effective is what I don't understand. And I think they conflate some of this stuff, the way that Biden was able to rally the troops in the suburbs is that Trump seemed unhinged. Not that he was racist. It's like he seemed disorganized. He seemed like he wasn't a good CEO. He was a bad boss. That's what they didn't like about it. It's not that he was racist. Nobody cares about racism, bro. Like, if anything, like, again, shouts to my man Jay Kang and his new book, The Loneliest Americans, where he's talking about, like, yo, why do we assume that all these people who we're lumping other Asian Americans are automatically liberal? Like, they're not. They're pretty conservative. Like, I know they don't fit under the white group, but, like, bro, these are the dudes that did a rally for the Asian cops' right to kill that black dude, right? Like, this idea that you're just gonna go with race, like, that people give a fuck about anti-blackness or any of this. They don't care. I'm not saying that it's right that they do. I'm saying if you're trying to win a race, go with the issues that people actually care about, right? And like, Donald Trump didn't discuss those people in the Philadelphia suburbs because he's anti-black. He just didn't know what he was doing. They don't respect corporate incompetence. They don't respect institutional incompetence. So yeah, Donald Trump they were repulsed by him. And conversely, they're like, yeah, Uncle Joe looks like a guy who knows how to run a company, right? And that's fine. But this idea that, like, Joe Biden didn't bother with that anti-race shit. He was just like, oh, the cops are great and blah, blah, blah. Instead, these people really think that, like, most people's fifis get, sort of ruffled because people are anti-black or anti-Mexican. Nobody gives a fuck about that shit, Nando.
Yeah. No, this election was kind of maddening. So Terry McAuliffe, who was the Democratic nominee, had been governor of Virginia in the past. And then he basically became like a Democratic Party fundraiser. And I think one of the most effective fundraisers in the Democratic Party, which, basically means he's a fucking scumbag and a slimy, disgusting human being. Also, the funny thing is that, Glenn Youngkin, his opponent, is Republican, was the CEO of the Carlyle Group. So the Democratic Party nominee was a guy named Terry McAuliffe, who was governor of Virginia, in the past.
Another retread. Very inspired pick there.
Yeah. And he then became a Democratic Party fundraiser, one of the party's top fundraisers. Okay, which basically means he was a fucking sleazeball, a disgusting, corrupt, sleazeball, and he oozes that from every pore. But then the other funny little element is that Glenn Youngkin, the Republican nominee, was the CEO of the Carlyle Group. Like I said, this fucking giant, fucking financial institution. The obvious attack line would be not that this guy's racist, but like the Mitt Romney attack line that Obama did. But the problem was that Terry McAuliffe couldn't use that attack line because
he's one of them too.
He was an investor in the
Group. And by the way, when you're a fundraiser at that level of the party apparatus, these are the exact people who you fundraise from, right? Like, which is why, like, Nancy Pelosi can never come out and actually, like, talk shit about the business interests. It's not just that she's a 300 millionaire. Like, when she was doing her job, those were her friends. That's who she fundraised amongst. Like, when you become a lead fundraiser amongst the party establishment, they're not getting these $30, $50 donations that I sent Bernie or Jamal Bowman. They're going for the big bucks. They're going for corporate donations, right? They're courting the funding of corporate big money interests and entities. That's why it's like, I mean, I'm not going to run a campaign dissing my own friends. Duh.
Yeah. And Woz, what the biggest issues in these campaigns were? It was like the critical race theory thing in schools, which was obviously like a bait for McAuliffe. Like, Youngkin was talking about, like, the critical race theory in school, like they're teaching critical race theory in schools, and it was a bait. Like, you have to have some discipline. You can't, like, take that very obvious bait. But, like, Terry McAuliffe ended up taking it, and being like a complete idiot about his response to it. Like, his closing speech was talking about, like, defending Toni Morrison's book Beloved, which I guess some people like. It's just like insane shit that, like, no one gives a shit about. But like on a deeper level, what I think what this is really about, I mean, and why this spells kind of disaster for the Democrats moving forward, is that obviously the Democrats haven't done anything really meaningful since they took power.
And they're not going to.
Literally nothing. And they're not going to. So that's one thing. The other thing is that there's still COVID, and that the sort of liberal Democratic response towards COVID has been very different from Republican responses towards COVID, especially recently. And regardless of whether you agree with this or not, the liberal response towards COVID has been like heavy-handed, like impositions, mask mandates, things like that. Whereas the Republican response has been like, this is just like, we just got to live with it, now. And I don't know, like where, the COVID stuff like is confusing to me often, and like it seems to change all the time. But like, I get the feeling that people are just fucking tired of it, and that people are ready to move on. Yeah, it's obvious. People are ready to move on. That we should probably look at a reality in which COVID is just like part of our lives. And like, if you were in charge of the Democratic Party and in charge of power, you need to like figure out a way to make life as normal as possible, and that just hasn't happened, because one of the big backlashes that they faced in this election was due to school closures and parents being like,
nobody likes that.
Nobody likes that. And I think it's a complicated issue. I know the teachers' unions all opposed school reopenings and things like that. So I'm not saying that, but that's the reality, that the parents of children were like fucking incensed that the schools are closed and that they have to like, figure out how to live with their kids all day while they have to go to work.
Let me tell you something, Nando. The people who started against the COVID restrictions, specifically the school closings, before QAnon and your hippie friends who do holistic medicine and just unhinged Trump supporters, were normal parents. Suburban ass, professional ass people who like they have to work from home and do their kids' homework and do homeschooling and do all of this shit. They were like, hold up now. I know COVID is serious, but I mean, come on. The kids don't get sick. Can we send the kids? Can we do like they were the first people to turn against the freaking school closings and the mask mandates and the this and the that. They were the number one because they were actually feeling the brunt of these decisions, right? Like people who were used to having 3 damn kids away at school for 7-8 hours a day, now having to deal with them all day, every single day. And it's like they're reading and it's like, yo, kids don't even get this shit. And if they do, it's absolutely not going to affect them in any really harmful way. Like whether they were liberal, conservative, whatever. I heard the biggest Dem libs bitching about these school closures from the start, and to not recognize that is just, I don't know. And it's something we got to address on this program because we got to keep it real here. There is an air of superiority amongst libs when it comes to COVID. When it comes to who wears a mask, I masked up, I'm vaxxed up. Ooh, such and such isn't vaccinated. Ooh, they're this, and that. It's like there's a certain level of elitism and like I'm better than you, and you're an idiot, and you're a scumbag, and you're whatever that comes. So much judgment they've done, a lot of libs with this. But the bottom line is secretly a lot of people is saying this shit. They're saying it out loud, but everybody's like, I'm over it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's right, and I think that some of the numbers for the fucking Democrats are just like absolutely fucking mind-boggling. For example, the Republican nominee won 55% of Hispanic voters. 55%. The Republican nominee won 55% of the overall vote, which is just crazy. Like you said, Virginia was traditionally a purple state, like a swing state, but it's been trending pretty blue recently. Like it was like one of those states that like is no longer so much in the swing state category. But the Republican won handily. Like this election was not close. Won 55% of Hispanics.
And as we get to the Hispanic part, I do want to jump back, but also that people need to note. And again, nationally, like you don't want to compare the Virginia suburbs to the Philadelphia suburbs, right? Like the DC, Virginia suburbs, the Northern Virginia burbs to the burbs outside of Philadelphia. But like these people were like so proud of the inroads that they made during the Biden campaign with suburban voters, specifically white suburban voters. You know who this Republican made inroads with during this Virginia statewide? White suburban voters, fam. So you can't even hang your hat on your little suburban win because, as we've said numerous of times on this damn show, Nando, suburban voters are the most reactionary. They're actually really flip-floppy, dude. They're not the type of vote that you can court and you can count on. They're super reactionary, right? Because guess what? Like, their gripes aren't based on some, again, material issues. Their lives aren't going to change based on, materially, based on whoever wins this particular gubernatorial race. But guess what? That school shit, yeah, that's something that affects their lives in an outsized way because all of the other shit is taken care of. So they will vote on that one thing. That's the burbs. Whether it be some property tax thing or some school district thing, they will vote on that one fucking thing straight up because everything else is fine.
Yeah. The overall swing in suburban voters to the Republicans just from the last election is just, it was crazy. I mean, it was just absolutely crazy. Suburban voters, which are the cornerstone of the Democratic Party's strategy now in recent years,
used to be the Republican Party basically exists as a suburb, or it used to be. When you think about the Romneys down to the Bushes, down to the Rockefellers, you name it, like the party was basically like suburban voters used to be the strongest core of the Republican vote, right? When you think about a Rockefeller Republican, what are we really talking about? Some well-to-do white suburbanite, right? Highly educated, probably went to some elite institutions. That was like just white educated people. That was the most solid Republicans you could find back in the days. Like, just the concept of like, we're elevated intellectually, but, we like our money and, we don't want to deal with the nastiness of these union people, et cetera, et cetera. And, with Bill Clinton and the third way and blah, 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 blah. And we don't need to bore you with all that stuff, which I'm sure you guys already know. But the Dems were like, no, we need to get the suburban vote. And again, it's the most fickle vote you can find out there.
Well, certainly if you care about any sort of actual, progress or redistribution of wealth or whatever, which is what it really comes down to. Like, it really comes down to like, what's the coalition that can support a redistribution of wealth and power in the society? And I promise you, if your core voters are suburban voters, you're just not gonna be able to do it. It's just impossible. It's antithetical. There's certain people on the left, I don't know if I would call them leftists. I mean, they're definitely liberals or whatever, who've been flaunting this strategy of suburbanites as the new harbingers of social democracy or something. And I'm like, I just find that claim so skeptical. It doesn't make any sense to me. Good old fashioned class politics is the only thing that will do it. I mean, you'll find, here and there, a bunch of people that'll be class traders or whatever. But on the whole, people vote in favor of their material interests, and suburban voters just don't give a shit about regular people. They really don't. They're just terrified of regular people. They fucking hate them.
The whole point of moving to the suburbs is that you don't want to be around regular people.
Yeah, that's the mucky muck.
That's the entire point of it. You're away from the riffraff. It's like, all right, I get that the Upper West Side is nice, but I'm tired of freaking piss on my steps from these freaking bums. Get me to Westchester, please. It's obvious what the answer is, but people would say, Nando, that you might be misled in your beliefs about class warfare and a class-based strategy because of what happened out in Buffalo, right? We talked about Walton. We've celebrated that primary win against Byron Brown over the summer. We were like, wow, look at that. She ran as a Democratic Socialist. She ran on real, actual meat and potatoes issues, and she beat this incumbent. And isn't this a great story? Yada, 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 yada. Of course, the money rallied behind Byron Brown that you'd never seen. Mind you, a guy who is corrupt. Just during the summer and the fall, the FBI is investigating his homies. Which would have back in the days,
raiding his offices like Succession, you know what
I'm saying? Back in the days, that would have just disqualified a person from holding this office. But It's just the party apparatus, the establishment of both the statewide party and the Democrats within Buffalo itself, in those many different districts, they rallied the troops and got behind this guy, Nando.
Yeah, I mean, you know what it reminded me? It reminded me a lot of when the Democrats coalesced to destroy Bernie ahead of Super Tuesday after South Carolina in the 2020 primary, because we look at politics and we understand recent political history, and we can just like look at trends and historical things and be like, okay, well, like, and that's how we gamed it out for Bernie. It's like, oh, look, the strongest nominee for the establishment came in 5th in Iowa, like whatever, like just ate shit in Iowa and New Hampshire. That means he's out, because that's what's always happened. And Bernie, who came in 1st in Iowa and New Hampshire, like, is in a good position to win the primary. Well, they just like, they just kind of like do this unprecedented thing, which is they coalesce. They convince 2 of the front runners to drop out and coalesce around Biden, and then destroy Bernie. With Byron Brown, we're like, okay, like, you look at Buffalo. It's a one-party city. Once the Democratic nomination is decided, that's going to be the mayor. But the Democratic Party is like, no. We're just gonna do this unprecedented thing.
It's 2 primaries.
Yeah, and we're gonna rally all of the city's business interests. We're gonna make an alliance with New York State Republicans, okay, to launch a write-in campaign, which never works. Like, it never works. Where, like, you have to, like, literally write out the dude's name on your ballot and then say that this is my vote.
Right.
And they fucking crushed her. They fucking crushed her. Like, it wasn't even close. You know what it is? It's when we talk about the ruling class, this is the ruling class imposing its rule. And when we look at just think about the Democratic Party was, and think about, say, for example, Bernie loses the nomination in 2016 to Hillary Clinton, right? And it was close. He won something like 40 some states or 20 some states, and it's close. But she wins the nomination. Instead of like then him dropping out and supporting her, which is what he did. What if he ran an independent campaign? Can you imagine the fucking reaction from?
Forget about it. That's what they did. Of course, you couldn't even imagine that. And look, and this begs the question, right? Because some idiot got in my mentions today because I liked the tweet saying that, like, the Democratic Party just hates normal working people. Like, they just do.
Yes.
And the dude hits me. He's like, "Oh, stop! You got to stop with this saying Dems and Republicans are exactly the same." Blah 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 blah. I'm like, they're not the same, but they both suck corporate.
Like, no, dick. They're not exactly the same. Like, they're not identical.
No, they're not.
Like, identical.
They're not, but they both suck corporate dick, and they're both anti-worker. Like, and because this example just begs the question. Why can't they ever rally the troops and get their friends to crush Republicans or to crush Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema for getting out of line? Because their friends are in league with them. Their friends, their freaking benefactors are in league with Kristen Sinema, are in league with Joe Manchin, are in league with the Republican Party. That's why they can never rally their base of support. They can never rally the moneyed interests who basically run the party and set the agenda, the lobbyists, the wealthy people, all of that. They can never rally their real support against anything else besides the left of the party, because that support is in line with everybody else. Yeah, they can get them to be like, all right, stop asking for Barry's birth certificate. Whoop-de-fucking do. Okay, they can get them to rally to say, "Yo, Trump, stop saying you want to grab bitches by the pussy." Whoop-de-fucking-do. They can rally the corporate interests against that. They can rally the corporate interests and say, maybe, possibly, if you can, don't murder black people in the streets for no good reason. Maybe, possibly say gay people are human beings, right? Like, they can rally the corporate interests to in concert for those causes. But when it comes to shit that affects normal working people, it never fucking happens. Show me an example of this shit happening. Because guess what? Their interests the money, the oligarchs are diametrically opposed to it, right? Like you talk about the groups that got behind Byron Brown. It's like a bunch of corporate interests who are getting a bunch of tax breaks. They're like, hell yeah, we got money for you. This guy raised damn near $1 million in 4 months for the race of fucking Buffalo. Okay, like, and again, this is a candidate, all kinds of corruption, basically the fucking
literally under an FBI investigation.
Yeah, the budget is in tatters, like under his regime, like, and again, he was an insurgent candidate in his day, and then him and his cronies just came and replaced the corrupt regime with their own version of corruption. But again, when people feed me all the shit about, the Dems, they're the only ones that want to do climate change. They're the only ones that want to do family. I'm like, where?
Exactly. They're in power right now. What are they doing?
What are they doing? When do they get their friends? When do they rally their friends in the damn business community in the suburbs to do anything but squash the left? Show me an example of this shit.
Yeah, I mean, I want to read from Branko Marcetich's write-up of the race in Jacobin, because it's just brutal. It's just brutal because India Walton, remarkable woman, really. Like, I mean, we've seen videos of her on the show. She won a primary race against a guy who'd been there for 15 years. Like, that's no small feat. Like, that takes, they turned the campaign once they realized, oh shit, we got to get serious and we got all the cash, whatever. They turned the campaign.
Bookmark this passage as well.
Dude, do you want to read it or do you want me to read it?
I can read it. And this is from the article in the Jacobin, and it goes, yet as soon as Brown lost the primary, all of his misdeeds he committed while actually in power over the past 15 years took a back seat. Brown successfully turned the election debate to the petty personal mistakes of Walton, a woman who became a working mother as a teenager. This woman got pregnant at 14. A single mom at 14, bro. Before becoming a nurse, she was charged with $295 worth of food stamp fraud in 2003. This is 20 years ago. She owed $300 in food stamp fraud from 20 years ago. She owed $750 in back taxes in 2004, another 20 years ago. She was stopped for driving with a suspended license. She visited her cousin before he went to jail. She failed to show up for a court summons that was sent to the wrong address. She wrote a rude Facebook post, and her car was towed just last month over unpaid parking tickets. Yeah. $750 in taxes. Again, this is the guy who's given millions upon tens of millions of tax breaks to corporations for nothing. $300 in food stamps. That's $1,000.
As a 14-year-old mother.
Yes. That's what we're talking about. A woman who got pregnant at 14, put herself through nursing school, fucking won the Democratic Party's primary for mayor in a mid-sized American city. Then this is basically what we could dig up against her, because she didn't, she wasn't a psychopath enough to want to be a politician from the age that she was 18.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
No, man, it's fucking bleak. I mean, I gotta say, it is bleak because, those tactics worked. I mean, and Byron Brown round up the score again in the suburbs. But the whole night was very bleak because, I don't give a fuck about Terry McAuliffe. Yeah, no. So what I was saying is that watching the results last night were very bleak or made me feel very bleak. I mean, I've had a pretty bleak outlook on politics for a while now, but I mean, this just kind of reinforced everything. I don't give a fuck about Terry McAuliffe or the Virginia governor seat or whatever that much, but it really shows. It really is a microcosm of just the trap that we're in, right? And that we have these two parties, one of which is like a frothing at the mouth, kind of like just insane reactionary party called the Republicans. And then the other one is just like this awful corporate bought and paid for party called the Democrats, in which there are no real openings for people like us. There's no real openings for a real left in the American political system right now. And, we talk about politics, we look at them, we watch it, but this podcast essentially is no different from the Succession pod I do on Fridays.
Right. We might as well be talking about a fictional happening. Totally. It's hard to imagine that any change can be affected from pointing this bullshit out.
Right, like that. We're just watching a TV show, essentially, and we're just doing the recaps afterwards and doing the analysis on it, but that there's no real political avenues to exercise democratic control over our system. Certainly not at the national level. I mean, look at the situation with the reconciliation bill. I mean, it's a goddamn joke at this point. So, and that's very
again, Nando. How come the president and the National Party couldn't rally their friends in the corporate sector, their friends, their moneyed friends? How come they couldn't rally them to save this bill? This is what Joe Biden, the leader of the party, wanted. Yeah. How come they couldn't rally the troops against the people that were going against him, against the party? Because we know their friends are the ones going against it.
Yeah. So that's and I think that this isn't to turn people into nihilists, because we should never do that, and that's wrong, and that's cowardly, and but the thing is, reading the national headlines, obsessing over them, whatever, my recommendation to people is always absorb the reality that it's not actual politics, that we don't have any sort of political avenues to exercise control. I mean, we talked about this a little bit when we talked about the Chappelle thing or whatever, that this is why we're doing that kind of stuff. But then you look at something like, the wave of strikes, the John Deere workers today voted to reject the contract deal that their union leadership had hashed out with the company, a contract that included gains. This is how militant they've become. It's not enough because they become very militant, So, and that is the seeds of a change, right? And even something like India Walton in Buffalo, in a way, she was a moonshot candidate for the position of mayor, which is very powerful. But without the power base necessary, both in the trade union movement, but also in smaller offices, the fucking city delegate of the whatever the fuck, and the council member of what have you, and the school board, the thing, without those positions, she didn't have a strong enough base to withstand, the assault from Capitol, because the assault from Capitol will come every time. That's just
what they do.
What they do. So, what I tell people is you have to kind of absorb the reality that national politics are just a playground in which we're not invited to. Yeah. And that we got to focus on these kind of local politics, and not really even the mayorship of these big cities. I mean, that's probably even too big. You got to focus on even smaller seats, and over time, maybe possibly we'll build enough of a power base to actually affect the big picture questions. But that, and doing whatever we can to support this, labor militancy that's happening, and that's kind of seems like to be waking up, and I think will probably continue because the conditions of the pandemic have scrambled everything. So yeah, dude, that's just, I don't know. That was what I was thinking about after watching it. It's
it feels bleak, especially in the moment. But there will be some small wins that we got to take the right lessons from going forward. But yeah, this one definitely hurt, because I actually listened to her on Hayes last week, and there was a feeling yo, I got this. And they just pulled the rug from under her with the money, and it's tough. It's truly tough. But, we continue on. I just thought that it was important that we sort of show people what Blue No Matter Who gets you on the national level.
Yeah.
Blue No, let's just trust them. Lincoln Project. Oh, they're never Trump. They're our new friends, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. These are the people we want to throw our lot in with. What that gets you on a national level, and then on a more localized level, where the Dems actually, because this is the thing too about this Blue No Matter Who, and I will not get tired of saying this shit, in places like Los Angeles and San Francisco and Buffalo and even New York City, where the Democratic Party machine apparatus is fully entrenched in its power, Who sees that as a fucking utopia? Like, in certain respects, it's a damn hellscape. The situation, especially in San Francisco, where the wealth dynamics of that city are just, it's disgusting. And the people who preside over it are all fucking Democrats.
They all say fucking Black Lives Matter.
It's absurd, right? And so when people are telling you these arguments about, oh no, it's just the Republicans are gonna come eat us in our sleep, blah blah blah. It's like, it's bullshit. Look what show me the proof of concept. Show me where the Democrats are completely dominant and ascendant, where it's just this great fucking liberal utopia. It's nonsense, man. They kowtow to the same fucking business interests as Mitch McConnell every single time. Every single time.
I mean, but the thing is, the liberals and Democrats have no fucking fear of the Republicans when they need to crush the left. Andrew Cuomo created the IDC caucus, which were basically Republicans in sheep's clothing who ran as Democrats and then turned back into Republicans once they were in the state Senate, so that he could block the left-wing insurgency amongst the Democratic Party in the state assembly. And then in Buffalo, what we just happened, like, this is again from Broncos piece in Jacobin. Brown was also helped by a bipartisan political establishment united against Walton. New York Republicans put up a united front with Brown, with right-wing party members, most of them outside of Buffalo, making up a third of the signatures they helped collect to put him on the ballot. Okay? So don't give me that fucking bullshit about vote blue no matter who. Don't fucking work with the Republicans when they want to.
They love the Republicans.
You know? Yeah. So.
Again, that's our bright and optimistic show for the day.
Yeah.
Of course.
And Aaron Rodgers got COVID.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers he lied about having the vaccine, but we don't really give a fuck. He probably needed the week off anyway. That's our show for today. Of course, go to patreon.com/countthedings, become a member. Make sure you listen to the Friday mailbag, the OG Bomb Show, all of the stuff that Count the Dings has to offer. We'll see you guys next week. We're out.